preparing this thing. All right. Well, on one screen, as I said last week, one screen it says getting ready to go live, and the other one says live, but I think we are really live.
We might be live.
think
It's
we
not shown
are.
on Facebook yet, but
So if you are out there, let us know you're there.
there it is.
Give us some comments about your name and where you live. We love to say that. Now, my Facebook page, when I'm looking at it, looks like we're frozen, but maybe that's because it hasn't refreshed or something. So
Yeah.
hello. So Lisa, how are you? Glad to
I'm
have you
good.
back.
Yeah,
And
it's nice to be back. Pullman's always a nice place to be.
it is, whether I'm gone 2 days or 2 weeks, whatever, I'm always so glad to get back home. And I have this nesting thing. I figured out that that's what it is. When I get home, I kind of have to wipe down the kitchen cabinets and get everything in place, make sure everything's fine. Like just, this is my little nest and I've got to make sure everything's all right once I get back home. It's the weirdest thing. I've done it forever, my whole life. And it wasn't until about, I don't know, 10 years ago that I realized that really was what I was doing. Whether it needed to be wiped down or not, because we always leave the house, if it's Bill and I together, we always leave the house how we want it to be when we get back home. We make the bed, that whole thing. And it is nice to walk in, everything's all safe, but I still have to do my little nesting thing. What about you guys out there? Does anybody do that when you're out of town, you get home, you kind of have to nest and make sure all your stuff is like wipe the cabinet or whatever it is you do? If you do, say yes in the chat. And that way we will know.
So what's today's topic?
So today we're going to talk about, do you avoid having difficult conversations? Or what do you do when you need to have a difficult conversation? Because I think we all have those happen periodically.
Yeah. So how's the weather?
Huh?
I said, so how's the weather?
Yeah. I know. Anything to not have the real conversation.
Difficult questions.
I know. Anything to not have the real. Yeah, just so I had a little echo back of my Facebook page open. So anyway, before we get totally into our topic, which is a great one, since we picked this out, I've been like last night I was looking at it and thinking about that, and there have been several times when I've had to face those, and sometimes I handled them better than other times. But as y'all can see on the background behind me, okay, we are now, it is time now to start stirring that pot, getting your orders in. You have until April the 30th, and it's only $197 with the discount. So the regular price is $397. You get $200 off. So you guys, you're not going to pay more. I don't want you to pay more. So save your $200 by April 30th. And I'm saying April 1st, Lisa. I think that's where we talk. By April 1st, you're going to have a lot of new information. Our celebrity keynote, we have a meeting with her today. I'm so excited about that, about having her come on. And I'm just saying, it's like life lessons through humor. It's going to kick us off on Saturday. It's going to be great. Lisa's going to be teaching her Time Lord as a game, right? Fill that in a little bit, because that's going to be on Friday night. You don't want to miss it.
It's called a gamified workshop, and basically all it means is that we pretend and we have fun in different ways. It's learning in a different way, and it's made to be fun. I always like learning, but I like learning to have a fun twist to it. So there's some games. Well, it's kind of a game, but it's a fun way to learn, put it that way.
Definitely an activity. If I recall, I think one of the early times, I think before we ever had a one-on-one, Lisa, you did a little mini workshop on that in some class I was in, either before we started Fun Fearless, and I think we had cards or something. So it was a very active participation thing. So I do still kind of remember that. I mean, that's been a while back.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it was fun. I have a lot of people who say they learned more in the 15-minute presentation than they've done it sometimes a weekend workshop. So that there's a lot of information that will help your life. It's not just time management. It's really about everything.
Right. And matter of fact, I'm speaking in Detroit. I'm leaving tomorrow to a big event that the Happy Neighborhood Project and this leadership tour, we're collaborating together, and I'm speaking, and I'm borrowing a little tidbit out of Lisa's presentation because I like it so well. And it's amazing, like you were saying, it's not really just time management. I'm teaching on choices and how to make better choices, change your life, change your choices. I know y'all never heard me say that before. Just every week. I mean, I talk about choices all the time. But it's all really about how we value our life, right? The things that, from the way that you're teaching it, but it's all really based on what our priorities are and what we think is important in our life. And we tend to make time for those things, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, so one more glance, you guys. I quadruple checked this URL or this QR code. It ought to work just perfectly fine. So take your camera, your phone, and take a picture and go to the website and just click it on, and then you can go back and get your tickets later, but at least don't forget to do that. Check it out. Just take a look at the hotels. It's a Suncoast Resort and Hotel, and there is we do have a discount for rooms, so don't miss out on that. So just be ready. It's getting exciting. So Lisa, when I put the topic out there, how did that hit you? What did you think about when I mentioned difficult conversations?
Oh, family life, because when you get together as a family, don't we kind of hold our tongue and not have those difficult conversations often? We're trying to keep the peace, but sometimes difficult conversations need to be had. But I'm not sure that we're really well armed to have those conversations all the time.
I find the biggest thing, and I am much better about it now. In my earlier years, and I think a lot of that was my Mary Kay training, because I did have numerous times that I had to have difficult conversations from a business standpoint. And oh man, my stomach would get twisted up and I just didn't want to have them. And I would always think they'll just work themselves out. And the truth is they just don't,
No, they don't.
if time would just, if we didn't have to discuss it and time would take care of it, I just never would have one, because I don't like confrontation. But I did find that once I realized that, and I'll tell you a story, because it's one in particular where I had that big aha moment. And we had gone down, so I was in Mary Kay. We went down to seminar. If you all know anything about Mary Kay, once a year we have a big seminar in Dallas. And I had quite a nice group of gals that were going down, and two of them, the two that I'm thinking of, and I'm not going to use any names, they were rooming together, and they had really just struck up this new friendship. Okay. So there were certain things, and every woman pays for her own, it's not like people are employees and they have to do what you say. Everybody goes their own pace, and if they don't want to go to class or workshops, they don't have to. So y'all been to probably things like that. Well, there were a couple of things that I really did want them to participate in. And I always let them know, here's what's coming up for the day and for the night, and I'll meet y'all at such and such a place. And, being the organized person that I am, I had that really laid out in my head, how that was going to look and how that was going to work. Well, there were a couple of things that they just didn't show up for, these two gals. And I was really close to one of them in particular. I mean, we were like best friends. Okay. And it bothered me. And by the time the end of the seminar happened, I was really having to control myself not to just have a confrontation. Because I'm thinking, you guys, you're not supporting the unit. You're just, I just couldn't understand why they wouldn't just show up or tell me why. But they seemed to be having a great time. Wasn't affecting them at all. So I waited, even after we got back, I had to get myself really under control. I didn't want to lash out. I didn't want to do anything coming from a negative, I mean, from a bad place. I want to handle it. So I had to get myself under control. And the weirdest thing, so I finally did. And I said, I just have to share this with you. And I just was very honest and said, I just don't understand, why y'all didn't support the unit and why didn't you come to, the various things that we had planned. And the one of them, and I use Susie for everything. Every example I ever use always is Susie, but her name really wasn't Susie. And I just said, Susie, so can you just help me understand? Because it hurt my feelings. I thought it was, anyway, like whatever other or something like that. And she was just dumbfounded. She's like, what? Are you really? She said, we were just so happy to be there. And we just got to know each other so well. And we just had such a great time. And it wasn't aimed at anybody. It certainly wasn't after you. And I mean, she was just clueless. So all this time I had worked up this angst about, having this conversation because I thought, and as women, don't we often blame ourselves? I mean, don't we often do that? Because I'm thinking, what did I do wrong? And I must be a terrible director. My people don't want to follow me. I mean, I was in my brain, I was really worked up about this. So when she just said, oh, so Linda, are you there? No, we just never have time together. And we just got to know each other so well. And I said, well, thank you for explaining that, because I totally misinterpreted the whole thing. And we got over it and everything was fine. But if I had never had that conversation, I wouldn't have known how she really felt. And I wouldn't have known that it was me really being my controlling sort of self, wanting to control things and thinking I could control other people. That's such a big lesson that I often have to keep learning. I mean, I just still want to control things and make everything happen in the way I see it. So anyway. Any of y'all have, go ahead, Lisa, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, to our audience, what is it that makes it so that it's difficult for you to have those hard conversations? What is it that's causing us to avoid it? I mean, in your case, it was not, it had stewed up in your mind and you didn't want to approach them for different reasons. But I think in every difficult situation, we're working off of past information to calculate what present stuff is going on. For me and our family get together, some conversations were very hard and took prayer and some things to help us have those conversations. And so sometimes a difficult conversation isn't something we have to have alone. We can rely on prayer and scripture and things to bring us back into a better place in order to have those conversations. Because like you said, I mean, you had made assumptions because of certain reasons, and then they were all good reasons, but assumptions sometimes skew how we're looking at and judging what we're about to approach.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think you're right. We often will, based on maybe even as far back just as a child and as we're growing up, things always went a certain way. And we still are bringing that forward in our current life, assumptions or believing some of those things that really aren't true, but yet we've kind of brought them with us through time. It's how people will react, or what are they going to say? And they're
well, and
they don't like me.
When you're having a difficult conversation, you have to remember you can't control that person's reaction. You can only influence. So you can bring to the table kind words or nice ways to approach it. And I think, like you said, honesty is a great way to deal with things. And this isn't the difficult situation of a conversation with a family member or friend, but when I was an office clerk and I was answering phones and things like that, because of my audio dyslexia, I would often have to have difficult conversations with the clientele and tell them that if I was going to take a phone number, they had to give it to me only a couple of numbers at a time. Well, that sounds like an easy conversation to have, but when you have anxiety about somebody getting mad at you and those type of things, it's not. And so I would just very carefully tell the person, I know this is a pain. I just be honest with them. I know it's a hassle, but I have an audio dyslexia, and could you please just give me the numbers a couple at a time so that I can get them accurate? And people would say, oh, no, I'd be happy to. And I was surprised that there was rarely anybody who was really upset with me about it. So people are kind in most cases. And I think sometimes we fear that. So we put it up front and judge that person ahead of time that they might not be kind to us when we bring things up.
I think that's great, because I think we do when somebody, so what you were doing is you were showing some vulnerability, but by
Yeah.
telling them up front, then they could really, everybody has something. I mean, really, everybody has something. So when you would do that, that would make them pause, like, oh, well, that's in their own brain, whatever, that's kind of like my da-da-da. And then they can do it. Whereas if you just have them give you the number and they go real fast and you have to repeat it 3 or 4 times, that is really much worse than just.
Yeah, they start getting upset. And the other thing, if I had to repeat it to back them wrong like that, a lot of times both of us would get frustrated and I'd still have the wrong number, even dates for their appointments and things. So I learned very carefully, very fast, that I had to either do that or I was going to have them frustrated in a different way. So,
right.
But I couldn't control the reactions. And I think that's the thing that we have to remember. You have to realize that we can't control everything. We have to only influence. And when we're approaching people about difficult conversations, you have to allow the outcome to come where it goes.
Right. I love that, actually, having influence and not control, because there are, as I mentioned before, that's one of my issues and I think it's coming from, my dad was an alcoholic. Some of y'all know that. I don't talk about it much. I'm the oldest child, those kind of things. And I just naturally want to control things. So, God just has to work with me a lot on that. That's why, back in 2011 and 12, it took me 2 years for my one word of release. My word of the year was release, but it took me 2 years to figure out how to actually do that. So it's kind of an ongoing thing, but I'm getting better. I mean, I really am getting better at it. I catch myself sooner. Before I would get down the road and realize it, but now that little it's like, okay, so sometimes I'm enemy. It is the same thing. It may not kind of sound like it, but sometimes I'll be like in a committee meeting. Those usually happen at church, are pretty much the only committees that I'm on, but I'll be on a committee meeting and we'll be talking about something. And I will start, when I know that I have to behave myself, I get this little bristling up the back of my back and neck, where I just get a little like, I don't think nobody else can see it, but I can feel it. And it's like, okay, Delinda, just breathe. You're not in control here. Let's listen to what else is going on. And it's just, so I think it's God's way, the Spirit just saying, pay attention, just take a deep breath, relax yourself. So do any of y'all have that? So if you do, put in the chat box that you either have trouble with control. If you're learning control things about control, put 1. 2 is you got it down and you're really good. That's not your problem. So 2 is it's not your problem. And 1 is you're working on it. Let's see what kind of response we get with that. So I think too, and you were talking about family ones. And I think one of the things in families is that we do start some habits, or we have some ways that we've done things in our families for years and years. And then at some point that just isn't working anymore. And those are particularly hard conversations, I think, in our household with our kids, and who knows, Alicia may be on here later. But Bill is very laid back. I mean, he just kind of lets things roll. I'm not so much that way. Again, I'm always trying to control the situation, but so oftentimes I would defer to just letting things roll or whatever. But as I've learned, as the kids got older, some of that just letting it go or passing didn't really help, because we never addressed some of the issues that would have made things go better, if that makes any sense. So as the kids now, of course, they're not at home, we're not in charge in any way of their lives, but sometimes I know I have to, not too long ago, as a matter of fact, we had a little issue come up in the family that really hurt my feelings. And I told Bill about, well, he actually didn't roll with that one. He got a little upset about it. And I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but he got pretty upset about it. And I said, I've got to find that right time. And I think part of it is understanding yourself. So I knew I had to, again, give myself time to look at it logically, to look at what their lives are. Was it an intentional thing? Was it just something that slipped by? Again, because often through the years, we did let things just slip by. And so it took me about, I don't know, a couple of weeks to a month before I actually felt like I could have that conversation that I needed to have with them. And I felt I needed to, because I didn't want it to happen again. And I wanted to understand if I was missing something, because it's very likely I could.
Well, and that's, family's so important. Many of our relationships are so important. That you brought up a very good point, which is that sometimes we need to give time in between to have a proper, difficult conversation. Sometimes we need to seek help to find a better way to navigate the conversation. I don't think there's anything wrong with not approaching the problem right away, and maybe talking to a counselor, or talking to a friend that we feel is wise, or reading a book on how to deal with it. And I realized that after, I lost my dad, and then now I've lost my mom, and it was my dad and I were actually really good friends. So I thought it would just be somewhat the same losing my mom. But I've realized that there's differences between every single relationship. And I'll get to a point on this in a minute here about the difficult conversation. But I've realized, being the person who's mourning, and Kathy Weaver has brought this up beautifully and often, and knows how to approach it. But I can see, as people approach me about the death of that person, how it feels now. And I realize that when I talk to people who have lost a loved one, that conversation, I now have insights into having that difficult conversation with them. And I realize that I'm wholly unequipped to have that conversation with them because of what I've experienced. And so seeking help to find insights and empathies and sympathies for our conversations that are difficult, I think that's a very good thing. Taking time, sometimes maybe not having the conversation at all for a while until we're prepared.
Yeah. And there probably are those, I can't think of one right off the top, but I think there probably are those conversations that you do need to have when it's happening. There are those conversations that something's going on, and that you kind of can just pause a minute and say, oh. And oftentimes one of the techniques I use is, let me make sure that I really understand what you're saying. Or, I'm not sure I'm really understanding you, because again, we put our expectations on the other person. We're expecting them and assuming they're going to react how we think they should. Why should we be shoulding them? And so I think we often do that. But then there are those that we can put a little time between. I would think, in one of the classes that I teach on making good choices, how, good choices helps you experience more success, that in those, that looking at the consequences beforehand. If you're getting ready to have a difficult conversation in your own mind, look at that, say, so, when I have this, what are maybe the consequences going to be? You know, how can I look at that from both sides? Actually, just helping us to understand both people, but also that take the emotion out. You know, don't be in an anger place. Don't be when you're totally upset, because nobody's going to win at that. You know, when it's that kind of a conversation, and really from your heart, knowing that you want. I always want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I want them to give me a good reason why, you know, or, you know, I want it to come out with a good, we may not wind up agreeing on whatever this is.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's, well, that is a conversation that, you know, kind of from the pandemic, what we've lived through, several of us, you know, we make different choices, but I want to understand why somebody made that the decision. You know, why did they make that choice? And I think sometimes just having a neutral conversation, it depends again what we're talking about, but you know, just out in our, so I'm going to just be real. Okay, I'm going to be really real with y'all. So, you know, the whole get the shot thing, you know, whether y'all agree or not, but here's the point of it. We each got to, you know, we each have to choose what we want. But I don't want to judge somebody else for not choosing the same thing that I chose. I chose not to have the shot based on the research that I did. And I'm totally 100%. That is my stance on it for me. Now, there's others in my family who didn't make the same choice. They did decide to do the shots, and I don't judge them for it, but I have asked them, could you tell me why? You know, just, I want to understand, because this was a very difficult conversation. And
this brought up lots of conversation that was difficult amongst families. And, you know, you bring up a very good point, because again, here's where that illusion of control, the reason I talk about this a lot is because Paul is always talking to me about this. This is his favorite subject, my husband, who's a counselor. And he talks about the fact that we don't have to control a conversation in order to have a conversation. In other words, you don't have to control the responses or how the other person reacts in order to have a successful conversation. You can have a, like you said, a neutral conversation where you accept each other's opinions and respect each other for the decisions they're making. And that's just a common God thing, I think, because God doesn't just come down here and rattle our cage when we make a mistake. He allows us to have that life and move on. And he does have discussions with us. We just don't always, you know, he allows us our own free agency. And I think that's kind of how we should be with each of our brothers and sisters, is just, you know, let them have their own thoughts and have that neutral conversation. I think that was excellent what you brought up.
And I think because our society right now is sort of at a place that if you don't agree with me, you're not my friend anymore. And that is so sad. I mean, I've just seen
it's really sad, because there's going to be one point in life where we don't agree on something. That means everybody's enemies. And I just don't buy that.
No, it isn't. And I've certainly seen, you know, people very close to me, you know, friendships that have been torn apart, that have been friends for 40, 50 years. And because they didn't agree on whatever it is, you know, what happened to, let's agree to disagree. You know, that's part of those difficult conversations. Like, let's have a conversation. I do want to understand, you know, coming from the point of tell me so I can, you know, object and try to convince you, because we're not going to convince them anyway. I mean, I really don't think that those, you know, when we're coming from totally.
Well, and I think you brought up another good point, because are we entering that conversation to convince each other, or are we exploring knowledge? I mean, that's kind of that's where those difficult conversations come from, is where we're trying to pit ourselves against each other because we want to be right or something like that. But whatever happened to just exploring information between each other and considering all things? I mean, I can walk away and still have my opinion. You can walk away and still have your opinion. And because it doesn't matter. I mean, people walk around in the mall, they all have opinions. I don't have to tackle them. Yeah.
Exactly. And hey, what if you actually,
and I promise I don't.
And what if you actually learned something? if you go into a conversation, really, like you said, I like the word exploring, exploring. So why do you believe that? I'm not here to be critical or to judge you. I just really want to understand. And I've had numerous times where I just never had looked at the subject the way they did from their perspective, and then and found out, gosh, and I do always say, well, gosh, I never thought about it that way. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm changing my mind and that they've convinced me or whatever, but it just says that I'm open to a new thought. And I think that's a respect thing, just having respect for the person that you're talking to, or, maybe you're within a small group and you're having these kinds of conversations. I don't know. Usually, for me, they're usually more one-on-one. I don't have these conversations in the middle of groups usually, but do we have any input? What's happening in the chat box?
Emma Lou said, I appreciate the thought-provoking discussion as I do, Emma Lou. And then Tiffany said that she's enjoying this, and thank you. And then Kathy Weaver said accountability is really imperative, responsibility, etc. And all those are great comments.
They are. And Emma Lou, I am so glad you're there, because my mind has gone. I have thought of you several times during the conversation today. I just want to let y'all know that Emma Lou, this is her specialty of really having conversations, doing things within your family that help build the relationship and not tear down. She is the expert in this. I should have reached out to you when I put this down, because I do. I want to have you back on the show sometime. We'll look at that. But if you want to reach out, she's in the Fun Fearless group, and you can reach out to her. But this is her business. This is what she does, really helping families stay together, because we all know the truth is that's usually where the hardest conversations come from, those difficult conversations, and being able to do it so that everybody feels good about it, when there's somehow a way to do it with no judgment and just being open to listen, because we live in a crazy, chaos, confusing, loud world. And it's so very seldom that you actually have someone you can have just an open conversation with and just listen. You heard the expression, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We need to listen more than we talk. So it's helpful to be able to listen to the conversations.
Yep. Definitely.
Anything else there? Well, we are at the top of the hour. Like, what a surprise. It's amazing. And I've had people ask me, Lisa, say, well, isn't 30 minutes a long time to keep talking? It's like, no, we could probably go for an hour. I mean,
I'm pretty sure that you and I could probably talk all day. But
I know. We always do. And I will let y'all know that we as in Lisa and I are having a conversation today with our celebrity keynote. I'm so excited. I have not met her yet. Lisa's been in conversation with her. So we are finalizing these details so that we will, by April 1st, we will be maybe earlier, but by April 1st, we will be announcing that. It'll be out there on the website and all that stuff. So you can really look at coming and listening to her. She's going to be great. It's going to be fun.
And once we have the grand reveal, I think we're going to have a lot of people wanting to be there. So
I agree. Now, why wouldn't you want to come to Vegas and be with Lisa and I and Kathy Weaver, Lynn Franklin? Y'all seen her on the show. Emma Lou's going to be there. She got her ticket early. She is all set to come. So it's going to be a great time, great conversation.
I just can't wait till we're down the hallways from each other. I'll invite everybody in for a pillow fight.
Oh, it's going to be great. So, well, everybody, thank you so much. Any last comment, Lisa, before we sign off?
I would, my biggest thing with these difficult comments is approach it in prayer and use that power. It's really potent. And I've had experiences where it has changed everything in what I did with my family and with my friends. So I challenge you, if you're having problems or you can't approach somebody about something that you need to, prayer is a really good resource.
Mm.
Emmylou and Lynn Franklin, those are other good resources, but
Well, the highest authority, going to the Lord is always going to be the best, right?
yes.
So yes, absolutely. You're right, Lisa, going to the Lord in prayer, because he will calm your heart. He will take care of you, and then you can have the conversation, because
Yes.
sometimes that's where we need to go to get that. And I think something went through my mind while you were saying that give me 1 second, because it was like this great thought that I knew I needed to share. I might have to just post it later, because now it is totally flown out my window. But I just so appreciate y'all being here. I know you could be lots of other places, especially this early in the morning. Those of you that are watching later, thank you for doing that, for just taking these moments out of your day to check it out. Hopefully you've heard some tidbits that will help you as you're looking, because we all have to have those difficult conversations. And I think, when we can approach them maybe from a different way, starting out in prayer, and then, having them being open to being vulnerable, to just letting it down and saying, I just don't understand, or can you help me understand these things, that most of the time people are willing to listen to us and hear our why we're coming to them, hear the reasons why. And often you're going to be surprised that to them it was no big deal. They didn't intentionally do anything, and it was just our own interpretation of it. So, all righty. As always, remember that life is not a matter of chance. It's a matter of choice. So choose wisely. Choose to think about the conversations before you go into them. Go into them with a prayerful and loving heart, with respect for the other person. And I think you'll find they're not as hard as you thought they might be once you do it. So, all right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. You're amazing. And we will see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
And it's recording. Okay, I'm having trouble getting off. So if y'all are watching and we're still live here, and you're watching me like make a crazy person of myself, I'm not. All right, there we go. Have a great day.